What's happening, people? Welcome to Your Forest. I'm Matthew Kristoff, and today I've got a really cool podcast about sustainability in buildings. So we talked about like actual raw resources as far as wood and the difference between wood and steel and concrete and brick and all that kind of stuff, and why it's more sustainable, the number of resources that go into it. But also the last half of the podcast, the last half an hour, we talked a lot about building a house, like a sustainable house for like yourself, like how much it would cost for you to build a sustainable home with solar and more insulation and all that kind of stuff. And we talked about net zero buildings. Yeah, really, really cool stuff. I've always wondered how much it would cost to say upgrade your house to make it fully sustainable or net zero, or build them from scratch. And like he figures it's like $30,000. Or $20,000 to $30,000, depending, or more depending on how big your house is. But if you have a normal size kind of bungalow house, it's not that much, and you'll pay that off in under 10 years if you're going to be there for that long. And not just that, but you have the benefit of knowing that you're not contributing to the increase in carbon in the atmosphere and increased temperatures because of that, right? So, yeah, it was a really, really cool podcast. The guy's name is Shafraaz Kaba. I think that's how you say his name. I didn't ask him, but yeah, he's an architect for Manask Isaac, and yeah, he's heavily involved in sustainable building, and he's a founding member of the Media Art Design Exposed in Edmonton Society, which creates public programs that bring design, art, and architecture to the public. He's also a founding member of Edmonton Design Committee, a project review panel for downtown Edmonton. Yeah, he finds time to write for the Edmonton Journal and has a regular contributor to Canadian Architect and Canadian Interiors Avenue magazine. So he's got a bunch of stuff going on, talking about sustainable building, and his house, he said himself, is net zero. He built it himself, lots of windows, and yeah, it was really cool. So if you want to learn about how to make your own house sustainable, this is a good place to start to kind of get an idea for what you're gonna need to do. And it really talks about why we should be using more wood and kind of the potential in the future too. New wood products that are coming up, engineered wood products that have huge potential to kind of take over some of the the previous resources that are less sustainable or completely unsustainable. So we talked again a little bit about certification, so getting certified wood, making sure your wood is sustainable and not coming from somewhere that's deforestation is occurring type thing. So yeah, it was really, really good. I think you guys will love it. As far as sponsors go, same three as per usual. Greenlink Forestry, couldn't do this without them, supported me from the beginning, gives me a space and all kinds of opportunity to do this, so thanks again. And then also the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta, same thing. They've been giving me a lot of support, and I really appreciate it. Wouldn't be possible to justify doing this without them. And Damaged Timber is an apparel company out of Edmonton here, and they are supporting environmental sciences through the sale of their clothing. So 10% of the sale of their clothing goes towards a bursary or scholarship they're going to be giving out in the fall here, the first one. And yeah, they're trying to support the community that way. So they have really cool hats and t-shirts and hoodies and toques and stuff. Check them out. They're constantly trying to change it up and do different stuff. If you put in the code YourForest10 at checkout, you can get 10% off on top of all of that. So if you're in the market for some new t-shirts or hats or something like that, check them out. And I know he's coming out with sales a lot of times too, and doing giveaways on Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. So check them out. Anyways, without any further messing around, here is Shafraaz and myself talking about sustainability in building and building resources. Here you go. So we're started. Oh,
good, great.
What's your background again? You're an architect, right?
Yes. So I did a undergrad in environmental design studies, which is actually like the design school that is precursor to doing a master's in architecture.
Oh, okay. I got you. Cool. Yeah. So how did you get involved in sustainable building and that kind of stuff?
Well, I guess part of it is in my master's thesis, I got very interested in natural cycles of ecosystems, and I did a thesis on the water cycle and how it could really help cities in how they take wastewater and clean it and use it in different ways. So that naturally kind of led to my first job with, I guess, an architecture firm that actually specializes in sustainable design. So,
okay,
yeah,
right on. So, like, what have you been doing like recently? Like the last 18 years, what have you been doing as far as sustainable design? What kind of stuff are you involved in?
Well, I've been really fortunate to work with colleagues who really appreciate wood buildings and wood structural systems, especially in architecture.
Yeah.
The very first co-op job I had at Manask Isaac, where I now work, was with building the Banff Town Hall. And if you've seen that, it has some heavy timbers and cross bracing on the outside, and it's a really, really great naturally fitting into that sort of town site building. And
that's beautiful.
And that's also a C2000 building, meaning back in the mid-90s, it was one of the first buildings that really emphasized energy efficiency and looking at all of the building systems to make it more sustainable. And since then, our office has been the first to really drive towards LEED certification when that came out in the 2000s, and now we're looking at Living Building Challenge and net zero energy buildings.
Yeah, net zero energy. That's a big one. So that's cool. So I guess starting, I'm not sure, and we can navigate this however you're comfortable. Which so I have a kind of a list of questions that I kind of want to keep the flow, but it doesn't matter if we veer off. That's all good. So I was kind of thinking that we could maybe start why should people care about sustainable building materials and just the basic behind that, because I think some people might be listening like, well, why what's wrong with steel, what's wrong with brick and stuff like that. So let's talk about maybe why people should care, and maybe what, if you can quickly describe what goes into maybe some of these unsustainable products.
So essentially we really need to care because we live in a very carbon sensitive world now, right? Mm-hmm. We've heard of the carbon levy and we've heard of the Paris Climate Agreement, and we are hearing a lot of things of how to reduce our carbon emissions. So if you follow the trail of wood and how it sequesters carbon as it grows.
So it's sucking up carbon from the atmosphere, storing it in wood fiber.
Carbon dioxide and creating oxygen, and that carbon gets stored in the tree. Mm-hmm. Then when the tree is harvested, it has a lesser embodied energy of production into a product, like a structural system for a building. So even a 2x4 that you'd use in a wood stud wall is far less energy intensive than making a steel stud that goes in the same building.
With the same,
with the same strength and the same length and dimension. So we see that equation being a huge part of the carbon reduction strategies we all have to take. Mm-hmm. And then as you look at wood structures, especially if you use mass timber or really thick pieces of glue lams or glue laminated timbers or something bigger dimensionally, they actually work in fire protection cases better than steel, believe it or not. So we're hearing, pretty happy with that type of performance, and
that's based off density and kind of just resistance to heat because it
chars rather than burns right through. Right. So
whereas
steel
metal
will melt. Yes. In fact, we have a really good example. We did the Slave Lake Government Center.
Oh, you did? I'm from Slave Lake, so
okay.
And you had to rebuild it a second time.
Exactly. So were you there after the fire?
Yeah, I grew up there. I was actually wildland firefighting when the fire happened. So
oh my.
Yeah.
So if you recall, that building used a lot of glue lam timbers and a little bit of steel structure, and the things that were left standing were the glue lam structure, and the steel had melted away.
Yeah.
It was like Well, that definitely proves how
Yeah.
more resilient wood is.
Well, and the reason it caught fire, from my understanding, talking to the people that were there when that did happen, was the wood chips that were underneath it as like not underneath the building, but like along the building as decoration. That's what caught fire and then perpetuated, right?
And the asphalt roof.
Oh, the asphalt roof, right? Yes.
So
yeah,
the roofing material is definitely flammable.
Yeah, exactly. Tar, weird, right? How that burns really well.
For sure. So no, we actually, and just lastly about wood, we really appreciate the warmth that it provides aesthetically and
totally
environmentally. If you walk into a building and you see wood and you see sort of this glowing warmth that it gives off, it's actually quite comforting to most.
Big time. No, big time. More than a cold steel structure or whatever, right? Yeah.
That's usually covered in drywall and painted white. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like the building we're in right now.
Yes. About that.
Yeah. So talking about, can you speak at all to like steel and brick and stuff like that, and like the proportions of resources that go into it?
Sure.
Compared to wood? Because I know,
when we look at the calculation of steel and its embodied energy and its cost, it's actually environmentally a magnitude more. So like 10 times more energy intensive to create steel versus wood that would provide the same structural strength or the same
10 times. That's insane.
Yeah, a whole, like, it's surprising. And actually concrete's even worse. So,
oh, really? Yeah.
So if there's been a lot of mapping, because we're very interested in life cycle analysis and life cycle costs of structures. We tend to do a bit of background and research into these ideas. So, if at all possible, we try to advocate for wood because of the energy intensity. And like I said, the carbon equation of actually producing that type of product. So wood versus steel versus concrete. And even brick, even though brick isn't very common in Alberta anymore. All of our brick kilns have shut down, apparently. So it's harder and harder to get that. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, because it's amazing that 10 times, and then concrete's even worse. So that's you're thinking about that's like resources as far as like water and just like generally energy and everything that goes into it, and carbon, and so it's a
well, if you think of how easy it is to take a tree and mill it down and dry it out in a kiln versus steel, where you take a whole bunch of coal and you have to find all of the alloy metals that you then have to melt in a smelter, and then you have to extrude it into shapes, and then you have to basically ship it, and it's far heavier. So even the shipping of steel is ridiculously more carbon intensive than the shipping of wood, which is obviously much lighter. And then the same goes for concrete, right? So
no, that makes sense. We'll just pull this just right in front.
Okay,
you can pull it. The whole thing moves. Just so you're comfortable. So then like what, I guess, so what are the resources that go into, you spoke to it kind of quickly regarding like, say, like a 2x4, right? So we're talking about like the gasoline and resources to go out and
harvest it. Yeah.
And then the gasoline to bring it back to market, energy to kiln dry it and cut it into something.
Yep.
And then
ship it.
More gasoline to go to ship it to market type thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's still 10 times more for steel and all other stuff.
Well, and that's also partly because of our particular region, right? We are fortunate to be in Alberta, where we have access to a number of forests, and very close to BC with even more, and have a fairly good local lumber and fabrication of wood structures like glulam's in our backyard.
Yeah.
So I guess when we were able to factor that, I think that helps us become far more wood advantageous than other places.
Yeah.
And I think that's fair. And I know BC, for example, even has a wood first policy in buildings. So
Right.
they're actively advocating for the use of that.
Right, and they have that the 18-story tall.
Brock Commons, yeah.
Yeah, and they're
UBC.
trying to do more, right? So
Yeah.
I was talking about that with Rory a little bit,
Right.
a few
Cool.
episodes ago. Do you know much about like certification and that kind of stuff as far as wood and like where your wood comes from and how do you get? Because I mean, there is unsustainable wood out there that's being deforested from South America and other places.
FSC certified wood and SFI and a whole bunch of others.
There's a bunch of them, yeah.
Yeah. So the challenging thing to do is balancing certification with regional materials. Right.
So certification meaning that there's some kind of organization that's making sure that
it's harvested sustainably and it comes from a not an old growth forest that we want to retain, but something that can regrow and be renewable as
so
a resource.
If it has a stamp on it of SFI or
FSC.
Yeah, right. Yeah. yeah. There's a bunch of them.
Forestry Stewardship Council.
Right. Yeah. Then you know that it was harvested sustainably. If it doesn't have that, then maybe second guess it. Yeah. So there's do you know how much like unsustainable or non-certified wood is available in like the Canadian markets? Roughly, if you can
actually,
take a guess.
I would hazard a guess to say that there's very little unsustainable wood in our Canadian market.
Yeah.
There's a lot of uncertified wood though, right? So again,
you don't have to be certified.
You don't.
Yeah.
Yes, which is a tricky thing to do because we again have to do some legwork in looking at the chain of harvesting to milling to actual transportation and so forth. And we actually have specified in our buildings a lot of regional lumber and wood that hasn't been coming from a certified forest, but we have actually traced sort of the chain back to the forest and actually recognize that, yes, we're actually getting wood from renewable forests or not old growth forests. And we know that the companies doing that are fairly good at ensuring there's sort of a sustainable, workable solution to that. So
right, and that's just it. I mean, in Canada, there is no forest harvest at a commercial scale that is not unsustainable because it's
kind of legislated.
It's all regulated, yeah. And whether or not it's certified is a totally separate body, and I know it costs a lot of money, and there's a bunch of loopholes and stuff they have to go through. So, but I mean, if you're getting wood, like you're getting like teak or mahogany or something like that, then you might.
Then you would definitely want to certify, but those don't grow in our region at all. So,
but I know people like for building furniture and stuff, they might be like, "Oh, I have this beautiful piece of mahogany," and for all you know, it could have been part from like a deforested area somewhere in the world, right?
Totally.
But you can get certified sustainable wood that way, but you just have to make sure.
Yeah.
So when you're out, so for people that are out there, they should. Try to make sure that it's at least from Canada, and if it's not from Canada, make sure it's sustainable.
Exactly. In Alberta, I actually probably have been biased towards Alberta-produced lumber and wood products than looking for a certification that is inevitably coming from the U.S. or further abroad. So
right, because we just know that our standards are pretty rigorous, and that it's going to be sustainable regardless of whether it's certified. But
yeah, as long as you do your research and ensure the backstory checks out.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Can you speak at all to like the carbon storage factor of wood? And I mean, you were talking a little bit before. I know that from people I've talked to, from researchers and stuff that I've talked to, it sounds like people worry that, when we cut wood, that carbon is being released somehow, and that like the new forest doesn't sequester as much carbon as the old forest, but that's not true. Right.
So, well, the carbon is only released if you burn it or if it decays, right? So when wood is actually built as a product or built into a building, as a piece of structure. It's actually sequestering or keeping intact that carbon in its fibers. So unless it burns or unless it actually starts to rot and decay away, that is captured. And I think that's from our perspective a very important part of its sustainability factor. And I don't know exactly the numbers behind new growth forests and if they sequester more or less carbon, but I can't imagine they would sequester a lot less if that's even a real idea. So, like, they are just growing, right? Just like an old tree would grow, but they're younger than most. So the bulk of the tree might be a lot less, but I think that's the idea of renewable forestry is we harvest when they're a certain dimension and a certain viability for products, and then we plant new ones to take their place.
Totally. And like my understanding of it is that it's what actually happens. So when you get the succession of a forest, so you have a young forest versus an old forest. The old forest is actually losing, like, I think trees are dying, they're falling over, they're rotting, they're going back to the land.
Right.
So if you look at on a graph the carbon sequestration of a stand, it's actually more of a sigmoid graph, right? So it actually starts off low, but obviously there's no trees, and then it grows exponentially until it hits a certain point and it starts to kind of round off,
right? And
then it actually starts to go back down again as the trees start to die out. So it turns out for us, luckily, that by harvesting more trees, you're actually increasing the forest's capacity for carbon sequestration.
Yeah.
So which is huge, right?
Yeah,
and I mean, it's again, the carbon is temporarily tied up in houses and stuff like that for maybe 100 years or however long they're there until they rot or burn down. But it's still being sequestered, and it helps in a multitude of different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So talking about, like, we're talking about wood a bunch, right? So if you guys, obviously in Alberta, I'm guessing you guys don't use a bunch of, like, you don't use like rammed earth and other kind of stuff. I know basically what I'm getting to, there's a bunch of different types of sustainable materials. It's not just wood. Can you speak to some of those and kind of what some of those are? Like, I've heard of rammed earth, and there's like hempcrete and grasscrete, I think, and stuff like that. I don't know what the usefulness of that is, or how sustainable relative to wood.
Well, in terms of rammed earth, it's super labor intensive, right? You have to pound down a bunch of clay and soil and material into very dense solid blocks, and then place them and then plaster over them. So we've seen the rise of quite a number of products that are trying to bring another level of sustainability. So I know hemp has been looked at in terms of creating composite materials. Same with fiber and stock material from wheat sheaves and all of that. So the Alberta Innovates Technology Futures has a whole lot of programs that have tested that. They've even helped me work on a project that tested torrefied wood, or where you take out all of the moisture in a piece of wood so it can become less prone to decay and rotting, and actually even basically by taking simple pine and spruce and torrefying it, you can give it the properties of cedar, where you can use it outside without having to worry about it being prone to rot.
What is it about cedar and like Doug fir that they can hold off rot and moisture? Yeah, what is that? Do you know? I have no idea.
I think it's the cellular fibers and how they basically are super tight in how they resist, the release, how moisture then is not allowed to rot away. Right. So there's something to do with the moisture content and how the cellular fibers kind of bind together.
It's weird though, because it seems like it's almost lighter when it's dry. It seems lighter than other woods, but somehow the cellular structure is tighter or something.
And that's what exactly happens with torrefied wood. So if I stick a piece of spruce in the kiln, it dries out. It actually, obviously, the moisture is sort of evaporated or kind of cooked out of it, essentially. So it does become a lot lighter.
Okay.
So yeah, we used some of that material in my house that I built a few years ago, and it's holding up really well. Other materials,
Fingers crossed,
it's been amazing.
That's awesome.
And really, right now, the world is again looking for ways to decarbonize or carbon emissionize products. So hence even concrete having fibers of various sorts and different things like fly ash incorporated into it. So to lessen fly ash is a byproduct of basically an industrial process where they take the ash out of flues and basically the baking and the high temperature industrial process, and it creates sort of part of the cement in concrete. So it's then used instead of being dumped somewhere in a landfill into a concrete mix. So there's lots of different researchers doing different things to find things that try to help us mitigate our carbon emissions.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, that's a huge one, right? I mean, with the increased amount of carbon in the atmosphere and climate change and other kind of stuff that, I think anybody that's trying to think sustainably is trying to think of ways that they can reduce their carbon footprints one way or another, right? Whether it's not using hot water as much or whether it's whatever, right? X, Y, Z. So yeah, like wood it seems like it's a really good way to try to help that if you're building a storage shed, instead of going to Canadian Tire and buying the plastic one, maybe you buy some 2x4s and some plywood and make one, and you're arguably doing a little bit to help.
Yeah, and they sell kits as well, so it's easier than you think.
Yeah, no, exactly.
For sure.
So yeah, like there was some other ones too, like actually, you were talking about what do you call it again? The dried wood in your house? Torrefied wood.
Yeah.
Have you heard of, I don't know, this is just recently, I saw this like maybe a month or two ago. In Japan, I think it was in Japan.
They char the outside?
Oh, no, not that. I heard about that too.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So you can go ahead and explain that. I'll ask my question.
Well, one of the really neat things we've seen is how when you char the outside of wood, it gives it a protective finish. And that's something that was, I think, again, the Japanese have made into an art. And even for architects, it's really slick when you see a black finish of with the wood texture to a certain building or a space. So there's cool. And it's, and it works really well in certain climates. And again, it gives a quality where it's more durable.
Right. I know charred carbon like that it's hydrophobic, so it'll wick water away easier, and I'm guessing it's more resistant to burning again now. Yeah. Like you may heat it up and it may smolder, but it's not going to burn
as long as there's enough thickness.
Yeah, exactly. So are they using that in buildings and stuff like that?
Some people are. Yeah.
So it's all certified, and it's like,
I know there's a house down by Riverdale in Edmonton that has some of that on its outside.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So certain people are being inspired by that.
Yeah, it's cool looking stuff for sure. And I know there's a bunch of technology going into wood. There's, like I said, I had Dalabar Hudak on a while back, and we were talking about all the stuff that FPI is doing in creating lignin type cements and all kinds of different crazy stuff, right? So it seems like that we keep getting better. Like we might be able to make cement out of just wood fiber that's been broken down and stuff like that. So that's really cool. I wonder, is that being used commercially anywhere? That kind of stuff?
Not that I know of. Yeah. I'm sure there's some test beds and pilot cases.
It's all very research still.
Most of it comes out of universities, and like I said, Delaware is sort of at the forefront of many of that, experimenting and testing. So, but I think that's the great thing about working in our industry, especially in architecture. We're able to sometimes use things of a very cutting edge quality to put into projects that we work on.
Big time. I imagine it's a hell of a process to try and get something hypothetical like whatever. I'm forgetting the terminology right now, but let's say lignin-based cement into production that it can be used in.
The commercialization is costly because, again, we have to conform to all the regulations or the CSA certifications and all sorts of things that make taking an idea that's unconventional and new and then commercializing it and having it adopted widespread in our industry. It takes time.
No, for sure. No, that makes sense. There's always the red tape you got to deal with, right? Unfortunately. Yeah. Anyway, so the thing I was going to get to was, and I asked Rory about this. He had never heard of it. I think it's again in Japan. They're densified wood. Have you heard of that? They're taking wood, and if I'm remembering this correctly, they're bathing it in like a pulp-based solution of some kind, like whatever they use to do pulp, some kind of similar chemical solution, and then compressing it, and they make it an eighth. I think it was an eighth as thick as it used to be, and it makes it 10 times stronger. If I'm understanding it correctly, it was something about collapsing the cellular structure so that there's no space whatsoever. Yeah. And it becomes super, super strong and durable. And they think that they can make, I think it was a 350 meter tall building by like 2040. This is some stuff I saw online.
That'd be great.
Whether or not it's true or not, I don't know. But that sounds amazing. If they can, I don't know how cost effective it is to bathe a piece of wood and then compress. Like I imagine the energy that goes into compressing a piece of wood like that has got to be huge. I don't know.
Well, it depends how much pressure you have to apply, and I don't think it would be that bad.
No? Okay. Yeah. I'm just imagining, like, how much weight would I need to put on top of a 2x4 to make it an eighth of the thickness, right? And I don't know how many elephants I would need to do that, but I imagine it would be a few.
I'll ask Rory about that. It sounds promising.
Yeah, he said he had never heard of it. It was literally, I think they just released I don't even know if they released a research paper about it, or it was just something like, hey, we did it for the first time in like a 1-inch piece or something. Who knows, right? But they gave themselves some time. They said by 2040. And I'm like, But I mean, if the technology keeps moving the way it is, where we're breaking down wood, a sustainable material, wood, into its component parts, cellulose and lignin, and utilizing those, compressing them, making them somehow structurally better or different properties, whether it's soundproofing or whatever it is. I mean, it sounds like it's only going to become more available as time goes on. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. And the beauty about wood is that different species of wood create different qualities or abilities to use in different things. Like you said, acoustics. Like we like to use lots of wood panels in, for example, a recording studio we just did for MacEwan University. And
should have done my recording studio. What are you doing in MacEwan? This isn't soundproof at all. It's just literally just a room, big closet.
So yeah, the science of acoustics is such that we actually can use different types of species of wood for different applications. When we need to absorb sound or reflect sound or perforate the panel to allow a certain amount of sound to go through it. So, and then have, insulating material behind it. So I think that's sort of the richness of using wood, is there's so much versatility in how it can be used and designed for.
Yeah, so it's not just a 2x4, right? So what species is specifically acoustically?
I believe we used a lot of maple as a veneer, but we had then used different types of fiber boards behind it, and with density to be able to absorb sound.
Less dense in between. Like so,
more dense.
So you had a veneer, so like
veneer.
a hardwood veneer, and
Yeah.
then you have a even denser.
A core that's probably denser than that. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
And then some of it was perforated or slotted to allow sound to go through into an insulating sort of material.
Gotcha. And what would the insulating material be? Do you
know? Wool fibers, or rock wool or something like that. So.
Gotcha. Oh, okay, cool. Right on. Yeah, it's surprising to me that it seems like we're only just getting into this, right? Like, I mean, we've been using wood since time immemorial, right? It's interesting that we're only just realizing now that we can break it down into its component parts and build it up into something even better, right?
Thanks to computers that allow us to model and analyze a lot faster and more rigorously.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. So I wonder, do you think it's likely or possible that we'll see wood take over as a majority, resource for building, like even tall buildings, and I know we're doing like short buildings like houses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And up to 3 stories, I think, or 4 stories is still just 2x4s is fine. And then once you get past that, you have to get into more engineered wood. But I wonder if we'll ever get to a point where, like, maybe with that densified wood, we can build a 300 meters tall building, majority out of wood.
I don't think that's out of reach.
Yeah.
But the thing I think we'll always have is sort of the idea of using the right material at the right time for the right purpose.
Right.
So I think the wood structural industry will continue to grow because, like I said, we have to deal with our carbon emissions, and wood is a really great way to do it. I still think there's certain places where we need steel. Like even in our wood structures, there's oftentimes we need to create tension rods to tie certain trusses of wood together, and a very thin, tiny piece of steel can do a lot of work. Unfortunately, that wood cannot really do in sort of a tension in structural capacity, right?
Right.
So we often create sort of hybrid structures for that.
Of course, and that's Roy said the same thing. He said these aren't 100% wood buildings and wood structures.
We're always using the right material for the right purpose.
Yeah, there are certain properties of steel and stuff like that, and even concrete. He was saying that they had a lot of buildings that Woodworks was involved with.
Yeah.
Doing wood, I believe it was, they had wood flooring, but then more of the structure was steel, and then I forget how it worked, but yeah, he said that it's a combination of everything, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if it can even, like I said, with like densified wood or something, if we can get.
Yeah.
Like what do you think's the limitation there? Because you said it's a tension. Like, so wood's not good with tension, you said. So what is that? What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, in a building, you have different forces acting upon different faces and sides of a building in different scenarios.
Yeah.
So when you put pressure on a wall, it creates like compression and the curvature that your one side will actually experience a tension side. So
the outside piece will experience tension because it's being
curved,
pulled apart, kind of thing. And the inside piece will be
compression
because you're pushing it together.
At it. So, but then you have to look at the 3-dimensional structure of how all of those pieces tie together, and especially if you do sort of like a gable roof type of idea, you'll have compression at the very top with tension at the bottom, trying to push the edges apart from each other. And you always need something to counteract those different forces. And, you can try to tie them all together with wood, but it becomes very thick and cumbersome. So what we like to do in architecture is, again, use the right material in the right capacity,
of course,
and
minimize to fall apart.
and also minimize the amount of structure, right? And minimizing it is again a more sustainable idea. The less resources we can use, the better off we all are, I think.
Of course,
and that's sort of the balance we're trying to strike.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So some of you were talking earlier about sustainable buildings, so not just in in the structure itself, but in energy wise. So like net zero buildings and
Yeah.
stuff like that. How are you guys going about doing that? Maybe explain what goes into that and how far you've gotten. And I know of a couple of net zero buildings. One is the Boreal Center for Bird Conservation in Slave Lake is
Yes.
net zero, or close, I think. My understanding.
It's one of our earlier projects.
It is. Okay, perfect.
And it was at the time hoping to be off grid, especially in water use.
Yeah.
So in that case, we used a lot of wood to help it be a sustainable structure, but it also has a very nice wing-like shape of a roof. And well, essentially a net zero energy building is something that produces as much energy as it consumes over the course of the year.
Gotcha.
And our best example of that locally is the Mosaic Center, where we basically covered the entire roof and some of the exterior wall in solar modules that generate all the energy or electrical energy it needs to run its geo-exchange system, and all of the interior plugs for equipment, and HRVs, the heat recovery ventilators, and even all the computer servers, which we actually harvest waste heat for.
Really?
In the winter time.
How do you harvest heat from the computers?
So basically, the heat is sucked into a energy recovery wheel. So basically, all of the air that's exhausted in a server room, for example, has a whole lot of heat in it.
Yeah, of course.
And then it goes through this heat recovery box that flows that air out in a series of coils that transfer the heat into the fresh air coming in from the outside that's much cooler. So basically, it's transferring all of that heat energy from the waste exhaust air into new fresh air coming into the building, and that's circulated throughout the building.
To try and heat the building.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
To retain that heat that's already generated by the server for free.
That's really cool. Yeah. So is it just solar that's running the Mosaic building, or is there other...
and a geo-exchange field, right?
So is that geothermal, or what is that? Okay.
Yeah, essentially a whole bunch of boreholes into the ground that harvest, again, the nature of the temperature difference between what's very low in the ground versus what's above the ground. So as you can imagine, in the wintertime it's minus 30 outside, but 300 feet below ground it's still 8 degrees Celsius or so. So that's taking that temperature differential and sucking the heat out when you need it for winter, but also in the summertime it's the opposite. It's plus 30 outside, but it's still 8 degrees below ground. That's so cool, it's
So is it just an open hole and it's just equalizing that temperature difference?
It's or not there's a whole bunch of loops.
I have no idea. You always hear about geothermal, and I'm like, okay, so let's explain what geothermal is, because yeah.
So basically, it's a bunch of pipes looped into the ground, and a fluid is run through these pipes.
Okay.
So the fluid is what transfer the energy from heat and cold differentials through the circulating. It's called a heat pump system.
What's the fluid that's in the pipes?
Glycol.
Glycol. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So something that can carry that fluid and then transfer it easily through the heat pump.
Glycol's that's also used. What else is that used in? That's
it's sort of like antifreeze.
That is antifreeze.
It's sort of like
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. So what kind of like say in the wintertime, how much of a heating of say the Mosaic Center can be done via the geothermal?
Well, the Mosaic Center is also designed to again harvest the heat from this.
It's all windows.
Harvest heat from the server room and harvest heat from energy coming through our windows.
Right.
Exactly. So that's what's called a passive solar strategy, where we have solar energy just coming right through the windows, and that's where concrete is actually good. It creates a lot of thermal mass, and so we put in a good amount of concrete topping for the floors in the Mosaic Center to sort of store that energy from the sun coming through the windows and sort of help balance the the temperature swings.
Gotcha. Okay. Do you know the proportions of how much each one is contributing to like heating the building, or is it more just like we'll just keep adding shit until it all works out?
Well, we had to do a heck of a lot of energy modeling to balance out the number of windows we had and expecting that solar energy with the heat loss those windows have in the winter, because windows are super poor insulating materials. And then we had to do a calculation of all of the computers, the lights, and the things that give off heat in the building, and map out that and how much that could then contribute to the heat recovery ventilator. And then we did a calculation of how much thermal potential we would get from the geo-exchange field. And the geo-exchange is probably more than half in the capacity. The rest of it comes from the windows and the waste heat.
Okay, gotcha.
And even the people who are generating heat themselves.
Right. So you said you only had to go like 300 feet for the geothermal?
Yeah, but there's about 32 boreholes, 32 holes that deep.
Okay. How big are the pipes?
They're really just an inch and a half in diameter, and they loop down.
Oh, okay, cool. And how much of it is exposed to is it like going up to the roof and back?
No.
Like...
No, it's capped. It's actually buried in the parking lot behind the building, so you'll never see.
So it just captures the heat, and it transfers it through a vent or something into the building, or
it captures the heat in a heat pump box, which then takes that energy and puts it into a ventilation system throughout the building.
Gotcha.
Or what's called a variable refrigerant volume system. So it takes that a refrigerant and distributes it locally to these VRV boxes that then take that energy and dump it out locally to each room.
That's cool. Well, I've been to the BC in Slave Lake a bunch of times. Like my mom works with them directly and stuff.
Cool.
And I've never checked out I knew it was there, the geothermal, and I've seen the solar panels and stuff. And yeah, next time I'm there, I gotta check it out. Actually, I'm gonna have. Do you know Patty Capsule? She's running the BC now, anyways. And she would have been running it then too, actually.
Yeah. Well, that building's over 10 years old now. Yeah.
And so, anyways, I'm going to have her on the podcast talk about birding and stuff like that at some point.
Have you stayed at the eco cabins?
I did. I think it was one of the first years that it was open. We were there. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Really, really, really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like it. It's a cool project.
We had fun with that for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful spot too, right on the lake there. And it's really cool. Yeah, like that whole idea, I just see that as the future of building in general. Instead of using natural gas for everything, we have all this energy built up and potential that's just sitting there and it's unused, and why not utilize it, right? So
we actually don't recognize how much energy the sun can even provide in the winter. Like my house does not have a gas line at all.
No, eh?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it's a passive solar house, so most of our heat in the winter comes right through our windows. Our triple glaze
and stuff too, or
no, just large windows in our living space and in the majority of the rooms. And the way you design a house is to ensure that it's the long part of the house faces the south, right, and the short part of the house faces east or west, and that way you can create this long energy capturing, solar capturing building that basically heats itself. So
the sun is always in the south and northern hemisphere.
Even when it's 20 below outside, our house can heat itself just from the sun streaming through the windows. So it's only on the cloudy days when the sun is not shining I have to add heat either through our fireplace or through our electric baseboards, which are then tied to our solar panels. So.
Okay, so how effective are the solar panels here in Edmonton? Because I know
awesome.
Yeah, they're good.
The colder the climate is, the more effective the solar panels are.
Really?
So,
how does that work?
Because solar electricity is more is electricity is based on resistance in wires and in whatever.
Yeah.
And resistance is reduced when you have colder weather. So,
Okay.
So
makes it easier for electricity to pass.
flow. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the whole idea about superconducting materials, right?
Make it really cold.
Yeah, you make it really cold. It's superconducting, and the electricity just flows like crazy.
So there's no resistance.
So we actually first discovered that with our metrics when we designed the Greenstone building in Yellowknife, and we created a solar curtain wall. So again, this curved face of that building encapsulates a whole bunch of PV photovoltaic modules. And after its first winter, it's like, holy crap, this thing produced far more electrical energy than we ever imagined. And
that's in Northwest Territories, you said.
Yeah.
That's so like. Wow.
Super far north.
So the sun's not getting very direct contact with the ground.
Yeah, and the sun disappears in December. But that swing season where it's fairly cool but still sunny, it was incredibly effective for generating electricity. And because they have super long summer days, that even helped quite a bit.
We always hear people talking about poo-pooing solar panels and stuff, right? Like, well, they're only 17% efficient or something, and then you don't realize how much energy that is, right?
Yeah.
So, like, sure, it's only 17% efficient or whatever the number is now, but that's a giant amount of energy.
Yeah, as long as you have enough surface area, you should maximize it.
Yeah, totally. So now you got me thinking, I might give you a call. I might try to build a house here in a couple of years. I'll give you a call, see if you can help me out.
Sure thing.
Yeah, I'm wondering, so say somebody that doesn't have a crazy huge budget, like how, if they wanted to build a house, like say a normal kind of like 1,000 or 1,200 square foot bungalow type thing.
Yeah.
How much more money would you have to put into it in order to get it to be net zero or close to net zero?
About $25,000.
What? That's it?
So yeah.
That's incredible. So that's okay. So let's walk through that process. So what would you have to do to it then for that?
You have to ensure it's more insulated than a conventional house.
So this is building a new house, not updating an old house.
Yes.
Okay.
So you make the walls thicker because you need more insulation.
Right.
So my walls in my house are 16 inches thick.
It's pretty thick.
Because we needed that much insulation.
Normal house is what, like 10?
Not even 8 at the most.
So
because it's a stud wall filled with bat insulation.
Right.
There's and maybe even 6 in some cases. Anyhow. So insulation is the one thing that will increase the cost. More insulation, more wall thickness, and then the other is really making sure it's airtight, so there's no leaks and gaps and things which lose energy, and then adding solar, really, which is now available even less costly because of our Energy Efficiency Alberta grants that are encouraging people to do that.
Yeah, so, what can you get back right now for solar panels? It's like
I believe it's about 80 cents per watt, which equates to about, I think, a quarter of the cost of the system.
Wow.
So
that's big though. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's a huge. That kind of. So yeah, you'll get your money back that much sooner.
Yeah.
What about like updating a new house? I'm thinking about this right now. My parents just rebuilt their house. It burnt a while back, and I didn't even, for whatever reason, it didn't even cross my mind for them to make it. They live on the top of a hill in Slave Lake in the Boreal. They got sun all morning.
Yeah.
Like, all day they have sun.
Yeah.
And they have lots of big windows and stuff like that. But yeah, they totally could have made it close to net zero with like little to. So now it's probably more of an issue.
Yeah. Again, if it's an existing home, you think of the air tightness. So fix all the gaps in the weaknesses in the air and vapor membranes.
Right.
Then if you can, add more insulation. So sometimes it's easier on certain houses than others because of roof overhangs are deeper, or because you can add or put on spray foam in stud cavities in other places, or even your roof insulation. Like sometimes you have an attic that's just a tiny bit of insulation, and just by adding another layer or two in the attic will vastly increase your insulating capacity. And yeah, then if you have roof area, just add solar.
Yeah.
It's fairly easy to clip on roof mounted solar panels.
Yeah. And now with Elon Musk making those what you call it, the shingles, the solar shingles, that's those aren't available in market yet, are they?
I haven't seen them yet.
But supposedly he said they're going to be they're similar in price to like the high end shingles or whatever.
Shakes,
shakes.
Probably.
Yeah. So that would be, if that's true, that's incredible. Like that's,
I think within a decade we'll see a lot of new products really pushing that.
I'm surprised that this isn't happening as like a commercial scale right now. Like there's so many new developments going up in Edmonton right now. Surprising that not a lot of those don't have this stuff built in. Because that would be a huge buying point for a lot of people, I would think, right?
Yeah, I think it's just people haven't recognized the opportunity and the potential for not just the sustainability, but the cost savings over the long run.
Yeah.
Like what if you take into account, if you own your building for more than 10 years, it's easily going to pay it back.
Oh, yeah.
So now the paybacks or the return on investments are becoming to a point where it is less than 10 years. And then that's sort of the no-brainer of why you would do it.
You can feel really good about it too, right? You know that you're not contributing to like the increased carbon in the atmosphere. You're not using up resources or all kinds of stuff, right? Like that's something you can't really put a monetary value on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could if you did the economics of it, but I mean, it would take...
eventually we will, because there will be a carbon levy that and sort of pricing that will start to make economic arguments for doing what we need to do.
But so many people are angry about the carbon tax, and personally, I mean, it's it's an eventuality. I mean, they talked about this like decades ago. They were discussing this concept, and you haven't. The way I think about it is like if CO2 wasn't an odorless, invisible gas, if it stunk like shit and it was dark purple, I don't think we would have been using fossil fuels the way we have already. I'm not saying like fossil fuels is huge and it got us to where we are today and we can't poo-poo fossil fuels, but I'm just saying that we're at the point now where we're at a tipping point where we can decide to do better with the technology that we have, and why wouldn't we, right? I mean, there's always going to be a place for fossil fuels because we can't make plastics and certain different products, and there's the energy involved in that is so exponentially bigger than anything else that we can come up with. But we're getting better than that. We're getting to understand it better, and we can be more inclusive in our environment. So,
and if we don't have an environment because of climate change and all of the carbon we emit, then there's really no economy.
No.
So this is a great way to look at economic diversification and sustainability and how it all comes together.
Totally. Well, yeah, and that's just it. I mean, it's not like a lot of people that are like, they don't believe in climate change or whatever, some people, and they're like, oh, well, or they'll say, oh, well, it's too late. You go, well, it's too late for what? Is it too late for us to not be able to live on this planet because we've increased the CO2 level so much that we're literally being burnt and there's no vegetation growing? But no, it's not too late for that.
Yeah.
It's too late. We already know it's too late for us to maintain the current state of things.
Yeah. The longer that we delay, the worse it's going to be to fix.
So it's not too late. It's just
that we better get on it to be cost effective.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge thing. I'm looking forward to. I definitely want to make the next house that I didn't build. I just bought a house 2 years ago, and I think the next one I get, I would like to build and do that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
We didn't actually say how much do you think, if you had to throw an estimate at it, if someone wanted to make their current house that they live in, net zero, I'm guessing it would cost a lot more than $25,000. But could you throw a random number for like a bungalow type situation? Well,
actually, if they can, the insulation, adding that will add about $10,000, and then if they can add better windows, is another 10,000 to more, depending on the size and the configuration. And then the solar itself is probably another 10 to 15,000, and so tying it all together.
Drastically reduce your impact anyways, and you can get money back for the solar. So yeah, cool. Any kind of final thoughts that you kind of would like people to know about building sustainably, or wood, or anything like that, or projects you're currently working on that you want to promote?
I was just in Red Deer yesterday, and we're doing a residence for Red Deer College.
Oh, nice.
About 150 student residence units, and it's a 5-story wood structure, and it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And it creates sort of, again, you walk into it and just the warmth of the space that it creates, and the feeling, I think, that it will give people as they are living there for the term or their time at university, I think will totally change how they study and they work and they feel. So that will open up in winter of 2019. So coming up fairly quickly. And I think that's a really good example of how we can build the quality with wood, as well as for the experience, as well as for the sustainability. So check that out in a half a year's time, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome.
See how that goes.
That's really cool. Cool. Well, thanks a lot for coming on. This is awesome. We went through a bunch of different stuff. I mean, I wanted to get, that's the one thing I really wanted to get into, is a sustainable building as far as like energy wise, right? I know it's not really as forestry related, but it's still sustainable related, right? So it's all good. So thanks a lot for coming on. This is awesome.
Thanks a lot, Matt.
Perfect. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Thanks a lot for listening, guys. If you want to get a hold of me or Shafraaz, you can shoot me an email, yourforestpodcast@gmail.com. I'll get back to you. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Your Forest Podcast, or Matthew Christoph. It's all on there. And then, make sure to share and comment and rate and review online, especially on iTunes is a big one. If I can get people to rate and review on iTunes, it really pumps up the ratings and gets it up there for people to find it and discover it, so we can get this information out there. Really cool stuff. So I appreciate you guys. Thanks a lot for listening. This wouldn't be possible without the support from the community and people that have been listening since the beginning and giving me advice and helping me along. And it's been awesome. So thanks a lot, guys. And I got lots more content coming out soon. Biofuels and more fire stuff. It's all coming up. So look forward to that. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll catch you next time.